Well, good afternoon. Happy Friday, May 17th. Mark Milam here, your mortgage professional. Let's get right to it. We were going into this week holding our breath, really keeping our eyes on Tuesday for the producer price index, but really Wednesday for the consumer price index. The consumer price index is the most widely recognized measure of inflation. And the last time we took a look at the consumer price index back on April the 10th, boy, we got walloped. We got a really hot, red hot report, said the economy's not cooling. In fact, consumers are spending even more. And mortgage rates took it on the chin. We lost about a quarter point in rate in one day back on the April 10th. So as we're coming into this Wednesday here and we're taking a look back at the prior 30 days, we're all holding our breath, hoping we didn't get the same kind of result. What we want to see is that inflation is cooling, right? That consumers are not spending as much. And we can start to get prices down, start to get inflation down. That'll help bring interest rates down, which helps improve affordability. Let's take a look at the week that was. I'm going to scroll down the screen here. We're going to take you all the way back to Tuesday first. This is the producer price index. Looks like it came in hot, 0.5 against 0.3 month over month, but really that hotness is because some prior months were revised downward. Sometimes this government data comes out and they go back and they audit it and they analyze it and they realize, well, there's some inaccuracies in there and we need to revise it. Well, the producer price index was actually revised down in the prior months, which made this most recent month, the change in it, more dramatic. It sort of was a bit of a head fake. You thought, oh, this is not a good sign, but in retrospect, what it was just a reflection of what happened for the revisions to the prior month. So that shifted all attention to the consumer price index, which came out on the 15th, Wednesday, and we came in under estimates, 0.3 against 0.4. We'll take that all day long. Retail sales came in a little bit cooler, and overall, we did not get that unhappy surprise to the upside that we had gotten back in April. Mortgage rates loved it. That is exactly what we want to see. We want to see some consistency in cooling down the consumer price index and then the other measure of inflation that the Fed prefers, which is personal consumption expenditure. So what does that mean? Well, first of all, our Fed Chair Jerome Powell has been diagnosed with COVID, so he's working from home. But really what that means is we are on the right track to getting inflation down. Now, this wasn't a huge miss to the downside. The Fed's not going to turn around and start cutting rates imminently, but they're also not going to be hiking. And the Fed's been clear about that. We don't have rate hikes in our future. They think they're restrictive enough, that they're sufficiently restrictive to continue to cool inflation. And we're just going to have to give it a little bit of time. And one of the reasons we have to give it time is how we measure shelter inflation or housing inflation. Let me show you something real quick. So there's two really broadly recognized measures of inflation, and that is the consumer price index, which we're talking about right now, and then personal consumption expenditures, or PCE. And you can see that the PCE version of inflation is a good bit lower than the consumer price index. Remember, the Fed is just trying to get to 2%. PCE is at 2.7%. We're not that far off, especially compared to where we've been. But PCE puts a much less heavily weighted emphasis on shelter, or to be more specific, rents. In fact, right here, you can see the consumer price index is made up of about 33% of shelter inflation or housing inflation. PCE is only about 15% of shelter or housing. And one of the biggest ways that we measure inflation as it pertains to shelter is through something called OER. You may have heard me talk about this before. OER stands for Owner's Equivalent of Rent. It's basically a survey where households are called. They would call you at your home, the home that you own, and they're going to ask you what you think your home would rent for, unfurnished and without utilities. And then you provide an answer. Well, that's a very lagging indicator of what's happening with rents. Obviously, homeowners are not particularly right on top of the market as what's happening with rents. And typically that shelter or rent inflation component, it's very smoothed out. It doesn't drop very sharply and it doesn't go up very sharply. It's much more smooth line, and we're seeing inflation take longer to come down because of the way that shelter is reported. That's why you're seeing such a significant difference between PCE and CPI. It's how we measure shelter inflation. So hopefully we'll continue to get good news as we move throughout the summer and into Q3, and we can keep those Fed rate cuts, maybe one or two Fed rate cuts, on the horizon for the calendar year of 2024. If I can be of any service to you over the weekend, don't hesitate to reach out, mark.milam@highlandmtg.com. Thanks.